Ad valorem. $2.95. Well, that's the thing. That's 2.5 years. I'm so sick of that thing. I don't know.
I love my children, so I can't imagine.
I know.
They still get along. Boy, yeah. My oldest is driven, and my youngest is just miscatched. Grins all the time. You know, if you upset my younger one, you know it.
She's getting along. I think these number two I got left. What you got?
You're supposed to read that anymore.
Too much information. Hey, Mr. Chairman.
You haven't seen
You got a green? There we go. Good morning.
Good morning. You don't look good. That's a bad bit. There's a smile. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Okay. Y'all bow with me. Gracious and good Heavenly Father, again we come asking you to forgive us of our sins. Just thank you for such a beautiful weekend. Hopefully we all got home and got rested and invigorated for what's about to happen to us. Lead us and guide us. Let us do things that please you. Thank you for the many gifts and blessings, but Lord, mainly for being there for us. Lead us and guide us. In your holy name we pray. Amen. At this time, we have some computer glitches, so if I miss you or something, that we're probably going to be on a hand raised thing here in a little while. Mr. Golick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if it is working. Okay.
Yeah, this is.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the chair's indulgence. I have the chaplain of the day today, so he's going to allow me to go ahead and move on an amendment that you have on your desk. It is a technical amendment. It's AM 292280. This is on the animal cruelty bill that's on the floor today. This is something that we neglected to cover in committee. What this amendment simply does is when there's a second offense on misdemeanor animal cruelty, that it will be treated as a high and aggravated misdemeanor. That's all. So if it's a second offense and a misdemeanor, it's treated as high and aggravated. That's what this amendment does, and we just neglected to do it in committee. And I appreciate your support of the amendment. I'll answer any questions if there are any.
We have a motion to have a second. Is there any opposition? Okay, that'll be an amendment on the floor today. It's a rules amendment that it came out of rules. It'll be on the floor. It's not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Ms. Houston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you today House Bill 825. This bill allows fruit growers who are licensed as farm wineries to expand their market by producing distilled spirits and fortified wine by the excess crop. This should take place on the farm premises where the fruit is grown and it is to be sold by distributors. Fortified wine and distilled spirits. Page 2, I'm sorry, thank you. I wondered what you were trying to say to me.
Page 2 at the bottom.
2. Excuse me, the bottom of the page on page 2. Where's? Do y'all want me to say it again? All right.
Do you have another bill?
Yes, I have another bill, House Bill 887, and I'm not exactly sure. I think that might be on page 1 at the bottom. House Bill 887, this bill removes the bond requirements from tobacco manufacturers and importers from the requirement of having this bond, but the bond stays on the distributors. And the reason for this bill, the tobacco manufacturers and the importers, after they pay their license and their renewal, they have no other financial obligations to the state, and it costs us to administer this bond. So,
No questions. We don't know. Yeah, Mr. Hamilton, and you just got to yell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's right.
825.
Hey, Mark.
I'm aware.
Try it and see what happens.
I've got it turned on.
On 825, I'm aware of refineries in Georgia that right now that have to take their product to South Carolina to have it fortified. Does this affect this, or is this something different strictly for fruit growers?
well, this is for the distillery to take place on the fruit grower's property where their fruit is grown. Now, I don't know if this will affect that or not. I really don't know.
I'm aware that there's a Senate bill that's trying to, I'm just curious, I'll talk to you after.
Okay. This bill does not do that, Mr. Chairman just said. This just allows the fruit grower to expand his market. He has excess fruit, and it lets him make fortified wines and distilled spirits on the farm where the crop is grown. Thank you.
No more questions. Thank you. Mr. Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. House Bill 601, that is number 5 on the first page. That's the one that removes the 2% COLA automatically from the Judge Probate Court Retirement Fund. We'll change it to a COLA adjustment with the approval of funds actuaries. And we got House Bill 974, top of page 2, that changes the way that people can obtain credible service into the Peace Officers Annuity Benefit Fund. Currently, they have to pay $20 per month, 10% interest. This is going to require them to pay the full actuarial costs up to 5 years of service they could buy into the fund. So we're asking for full actuarial costs when they buy their years. And I would appreciate your consideration.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Battles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I bring to you, it's on page 3. It's actually the second one down under structured rules. House Bill 295 has come out of a 2-year study, and through this, it amends Title 48 of the OCG as a comprehensive revision of the provisions regarding ad valorem tax, the collection of those, the assessments, and how those appeal processes would be carried out. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Thank you. Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Toward the top of the second page, modified open House Bill 977. At present, there is no rule that requires redaction of Social Security numbers, bank account numbers, personal information like that in court filings. This bill simply requires redaction of all but the last 4 digits. It is modeled on a federal rule on that subject matter with the Georgia twist to it, of course, that we did in judiciary, but I would commend it to the committee.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Hedgett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I bring House Bill 998. It's on page 3 under modified structures, about middle of the page. This bill allows the Georgia Board of Physicians workforce a little more flexibility in determining medically underserved and rural areas where physicians can go to work and have the service scholarship forgiveness in the counties where they serve.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bottom of page 3, structured rule, 2 measures. House Bill 412 is permissive. It allows property tax bills to be sent electronically, and if the taxpayer chooses to take advantage of that, it's permissive. And House Bill 900, the very last bill on structured, page 3, is exempts from sales tax consumables and manufacturing, the last item in the integrated manufacturing plan. There's no impact to the state on that.
Mr. Roberts.
Correct. It's optional on both sides. A taxing jurisdiction is not mandated to offer it electronically. They would have to choose to offer it electronically first. And if a taxing jurisdiction makes that decision, then the taxpayer would also have the option to receive it that way or the traditional means.
What is a consumable that is used in manufacturing?
This is House Bill 900. This could be items such as one-time use, tapes, chemicals, dyes, but there are items that are consumed in the process but not ultimately delivered to the end user, to the customer. So in the manufacturing process, you may have a dye that is created to make a particular item that's used one time but not delivered to the customer. The Department of Revenue indicates that there's negligible impact, and the cost of auditing would offset that.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Efstration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bring today HB 938 and 939, page 1 at the bottom, modified open rule. HB 938 would create a nonpartisan office of Chief Magistrate in Gwinnett County. This is to support an independent judiciary. The bill has the support of all Gwinnett judges, Superior and State Court, and 2/3 bipartisan support from the Gwinnett House delegation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you.
HB 939, Mr. Chairman, would create a nonpartisan office of probate court in Gwinnett County with the same reasons and background given.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Atwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I bring before you for your favorable consideration House Bill 776 under the modified open rule, about a third of the way down. This is the companion bill to House Bill 890 that passed out of the House the other day, dealing with the Jury Composition Act that we passed several years ago. It has the support of the Council of Superior Court Clerks. It was brought to us by them, and it literally is a cleanup bill. Also, it has the support of the Judicial Council of Georgia, and it does two things. It amends the authorization so that Superior Court clerks can retrieve data necessary to refine the master jury list that go out to the counties. And it also removes some antiquated language dealing with jury commissioners.
Questions? No questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I bring to you this morning House Bill 1009. It's modified open. It's the third bill down on page 2. Mr. Chairman, this is a bill that was passed in 2010, both the House and the Senate, and signed into law by the governor. However, our previous commission did not opt in to participate with the MARTA program, and so our commissioners now want to participate with, or at least have this as an option for Clayton County to participate in the MARTA program for public transportation in Clayton County. And the only thing we're doing, Mr. Chairman, is changing the date from 2012 to 2016.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you, and ask for your favorable consideration.
Mr. Caldwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. If you look sixth from the bottom on the first page, you will find House Bill 886. This is one of the more simple bills that will be presented to you today. We require all local governments to hold public hearings prior to passage of a budget, except for school governing authorities. So this would require local school districts and charter schools in the state of Georgia to hold 2 public hearings prior to passage of a budget, publish their summary budgets on their website, and make available upon request electronically their line item detailed budget. There is no opposition to the bill. It passed unanimously out of Education Subcommittee and full committee. I've worked with the Georgia Charter Schools Association, the School Board Association, and about 40 other groups to make this bill happen. If I can give any compelling evidence there's no opposition, Cherokee County School Board is not in opposition to the bill. So be happy to answer any questions.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Modified structured, page 3, HB 957, about a third of the way down, the Georgia Brownfield Act. This legislation refines and enhances legislation that was first approved about a dozen years ago, enables subsequent owners or leasehold interest holders of polluted properties to develop those properties without incurring the obligation. The Atlantic Steel to Atlantic Station property and project is the poster child, but it's been used numerous times around the state, and again, this improves and enhances.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gravely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. I bring to you on the first page of your rule sheet, third bill down, HB 449. This is the 911 bill. What this bill will do, it would prohibit the audio portion of a 911 call where the caller died during the call. It would prohibit it from public access. However, the transcripts are still available. This bill went through a very robust vetting in the Jacobs Subcommittee, then came through with a unanimous vote in the Willard Judiciary Committee, Chairman Willard's committee. The bill is supported by ACCG, the Georgia Chiefs Association, the Georgia Commission on Sexual Violence, the Georgia Sheriff's Association. I ask for favorable consideration. It's a good bill.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you.
Mr. Pack. Mr. Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring you 2 bills. First one on page 1, under modified open, the third bill, House Bill 566. This bill would allow a mechanic in connection with fixing a car for failure of emission test to test drive that car if it has an expired tag. The second bill is on page 2 under modified structure, halfway down, the 8th bill, House Bill 504. This bill would allow, under limited circumstances, evidence of non-use of seatbelt by a plaintiff. That evidence will go to the jury to determine whether or not damages should be apportioned or mitigated. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you.
Oh,
You're good.
thank you.
Wait a second. Wait a second.
It doesn't change anything with respect to the current seatbelt law. All it does is, if in fact that the plaintiff in a case, defense in a case shows by clear and convincing evidence to a judge that the person was 18 years old and also was not wearing a seatbelt, yes, and that can come in, and the jury may consider that. And if they're not required, Mr. Chairman, if they're not required to wear a seatbelt, or the car doesn't have a seatbelt, this law will not apply.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all through? All right, just I thought it was Tom Murphy talking to me up here. I didn't know who it was. Sir. That's almost too good to pass up. Ms. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I come today to ask again for House Bill 788. It is on page 2 under modified structured. This would allow for the University System of Georgia to enter into contractual agreements with private vendors to manage and operate housing and parking on university system property. This bill has been, there is an amendment before you on your desk to be offered by members of the Rules Committee. It has been worked on very diligently with members of the university system to address the concerns that were expressed by members of the House regarding use and procurement processes. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Any questions? Okay. Matt.
Hey. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's an amendment on the committee member's desk, AM 340631, offered by myself and Representative Smyrie and Chairman Earhart, the pro tem, and the minority leader. And it was sent back to Rules because there were a couple of concerns expressed about the bill. The intent all along has been to just address use this mechanism to address housing and potentially a couple of parking facilities, and there was concern that it could have been used more expansively than that. This makes clear it's only to be used for housing and parking facilities, and also we wanted to make doubly sure that this mechanism will only be used if it goes through a competitive bid procurement process. It was silent on that. It was the intention all along, but this makes it abundantly clear that this has to go through a competitive bid process, this amendment. I'd offer it for consideration to the Rules Committee.
You've got a motion to adopt an amendment. Do I hear we've got a second? Any opposed to that amendment? All right, that amendment will be on the floor when the bill gets to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Have you got anything else?
I do have one other bill to ask for today on page 3, also under modified structured, House Bill 908. This bill would provide an extension of a sunset date for the collection of tire fees for the Solid Waste Trust Fund.
Mr. Powell, you got any questions? It won't work. Loud. Just okay. You're an attorney.
The extension is for an additional 5 years.
Second of all is the amount of funding being increased in order to comply with the requirements of existing law
An additional $855,000 was added to the FY 2015 budget in a movement toward full funding.
You happy? I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Even though I don't think you really are happy. I don't think so. Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to ask for House Bill 923, which is on page 3 under modified structured, about a third of the way down the page, Journey and Coward Act, which is a bill to move the child fatality review panels from the governor's office to GBI and to essentially clarify some somewhat convoluted language related to Open Records Act requests and what can be redacted from those responses to those requests.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here today to ask for HB 872. It's on the third page of modified structure, the second bill. Basically known as the Public Safety Peer Counseling Bill. This bill establishes statutory privilege between trained public safety peer counselors and law enforcement personnel and their family. It passed out of the Public Safety Committee unanimously.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Page 3, under structured rule, House Bill 153. This would allow counties, if they so choose, and this is an option, to put up for referendum a SPLOST rate at less than 1%. It includes stipulation that if they were to do this, they have to sign off on an intergovernmental agreement, an IGA, with every single qualified municipality, every single city in their county.
Questions? No questions. Thank you. Mr. Mayo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here to ask for House Bill 405 on page 1 under modified open rule. This bill would require the boards of charter schools to participate in board governance training. This is something current law requires for traditional school boards, and we'd like charter schools to have the same accountability with public taxpayer money and bring some uniformity to the statute, and it simply would require board governance training for charter schools once the petitions are approved.
Questions? No questions.
Thank you.
Wait just under the rules of the wall, Mr. Dollar. You just get up and come on down here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here. For the committee, I have HB 854. This bill does is it alters the cap that condominium associations can issue to for special projects. Currently it's at $200, and it changes that to 1/6 of the annual dues. This cap was set in 1990 and has not been looked at since then. One of the ideas is to tie it to the dues. That way we don't have to come back in 5, 10, 20 years and reset it. Currently, Georgia is the only state in the country that sets such a cap.
Any questions? Good bill.
Thank you.
Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 2, under modified structure, in House Bill 88, this bill is pretty simple. It just will waive the Class E and F license designation for certified volunteer firemen, a very small, limited group of dedicated individuals in the state. This will go a long way to show our appreciation for their sacrifices and also help us to encourage more of these to actually go out and get this certification that they're supposed to have. We found there's some issues there which could cause some liability issues for municipalities.
Any questions? No questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dudgeon.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I bring to you House Bill 897 towards the top of page 3 under modified structured, sort of the omnibus education bill for this session. We discussed it last time. I do have an amendment. My friends at Atlanta Public Schools discovered a word which we had added in subcommittee, which is an important word, somehow disappeared from the final draft. We need to change the word funding to initial funding. Otherwise, the reading of the bill would be they'd have to fund their charter schools 100% of their yearly funding at the beginning of the year. So really, that's an important technical issue but needs to be resolved. So if the committee is gracious enough to put the bill on the floor, I'd ask they'd also approve the amendment, 33-1392.
Anybody on this? All right, we have a motion and a second to amend AM 33-1392, Mr. Dudgeon, by striking the funding and putting in the initial funding. Again, that'll be an amendment that has to be done on the floor if you pass it. Is there any objection? No objection. All right. When that bill gets on the floor, that amendment should be voted on too. What's that got to do with that? Any more questions? Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Have you got enough time left in your tenure down here to be passing bills?
Well, I guess that'll be to your discretion.
Somebody
Mr.
told
Chairman.
me you took a job.
What's that?
You're going to take a job?
Yeah, I'm gonna miss this body.
As many kids as you've got, you better get a job.
That's a good point, Mr. Chairman. This bill is second to the bottom, HB 947 under modified open rule. It's HB 947, and this bill provides an additional option to employers to pay their employees in addition to cash check, direct deposit. They can now, through this bill, pay through payroll, a card. Under subsection C, it states that if they elect to pay through a payroll card, they must give the option of direct deposit and lay out the fees associated. This passed unanimously out of committee, supported by the NFIB, the Chamber, Retailers Association, and I would ask for your favorable consideration.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here to ask you for your consideration today for House Bill 782, page 3, next to the last, under structured rule, next to the bottom of the from the bottom. This bill is known as the Facilitating Business Rapid Response to the State Declared Disasters Act, and the bill seeks to eliminate the burden of out-of-state contractors coming in to work on our infrastructure when there is a declared state or national disaster. Very appropriate timing for this bill, given the fact that we've gone through these two ice storms here lately. I'd like to ask for your favorable consideration.
Any questions? Thank you. Okay, we're going to get a wireless mic somewhere. And as I tell you what, let's do, let's just start right down with Tommy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First page, House Bill 803 would require law enforcement agencies to come up with a policy addressing how peace officers would negotiate their encounters with domestic pet animals. And then on the second page, House Bill 91, additional protections for government statues and monuments. Appreciate your consideration on those.
Just pass it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 3, about a third of the way down, House Bill 984 sets up the framework for a sports marketing fund. There is no funds in this bill. strictly framework.
Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bottom of page 2, modified structure at HB 826. This proposition eliminates the current process where school boards have no options with respect to knives and bats on campus. It gives school boards discretion on how to handle non-firearm items on school safety zones.
Mr. Willard.
Mr. Chairman, on page 1, fifth bill down, House Bill 643, this was under our Georgia Civil Practice Act. It is a matter dealing with what we call discovery provisions, and it is addressing the exponential growth of electronic record keeping, document keeping, and sets up some provisions to deal with the records as well as some other changes within the discovery statutes that we have year and the work coming out of the chamber and a state bar committee, and then worked by us over the entering time since last session.
Any questions? Thank you. Sharon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the bottom of page 1, House Bill 965, it's the Georgia 911 medical amnesty law. People are dying from drug overdoses, and especially young people between 18 and 29, because people that are with them that are also doing drugs will not stay with them and call 911. This would allow someone, if you stay with them and call 911, you would not be charged. I've worked with the prosecuting attorney so that we're not going to let any drug dealers go. It's very tightly written, and it passed without opposition through judiciary non-civil.
Is it going to have a floor amendment on it?
It has. I would ask that it be moved to modified structure.
It's modified open, and you can do it on. It's fine to do it on the floor as long as it's been on, on the desk.
Yes, sir.
And I'll put it on for Wednesday, and to give you time to get whatever you need to be done.
I have it here, sir, and would it be better since it's so tightly drawn by the prosecuting attorneys?
Pass the baton there. What we'll do is I'll move it to modified structure, and then Keith will hand out an amendment, and then we'll come back to that in a minute.
You want me to wait on my other?
No, go ahead and do it.
It would be the one, it's on the third page, halfway down, on modified structure. It's 899. It's for unlicensed personal care homes. It raises the penalty to a felony. The judge can go over it. This is where our seniors are being so abused, and stopping this would be a major move toward stopping elder abuse. Thank you.
Which one was that? 899. Okay. Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3. The first one is on page 2 under modified structure. It's House Bill 438. Currently, we have alternative dispute resolution in a number of our circuits that try to resolve cases without jury trials, save money, save time, and because of the reduction in the number of filings and because of increasing costs, the local courts, and this is endorsed by the Judicial Council, are requesting an authorization for increasing the fee from $7.50 to $10 per case. The amount is set by the local court. Some of them are charging as low as $3 per case, but it will authorize those that have a more extensive service to raise up to $10. And that's 438. Then on page 3, under structured rule, House Bill 755 came through Ways and Means. It amends the provisions in the Forest Land Protection Act as far as determining what the base year fair market value, how it's determined, and also deals with how disputed tax bills are resolved. And then House Bill 757, right below it, modifies CUVA, the Conservation Use and Flip of the Federal Forest Land Protection Act, to specify that if there is a solar farm built on one of these conservation use properties, that will not constitute a breach, but the land on which it is constructed will come out and will be taxed at fair market value, which is very similar to the way we do cell towers now. And I would ask your favorable consideration.
Okay, Mr. Roberts.
Well, it's dealing with some of the valuation problems, but a lot of them are not using the assessor's manuals like they should be, and this requires them to do that.
Next one. You ain't got a next one. It's Morris. Okay, Rice.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to put my name beside Ms. Destration's 938 and 939, the Gwinnett County bills.
Mr. Cassis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to put my name by on page 3, House Bill 897, for Representative Dudgeon. And
Okay. Ms. Dempsey. If you've got one, if you hadn't, Mr. Powell, I know you do.
House Bill 878. This would allow the tow truck companies that do non-consensual tows for public safety and local governments to be able to use all of their all the fees that's charged for storage and the pickup on these abandoned vehicles to provide a lien and to allow the disposition of those vehicles, that they can split that with local governments to try to recover some of their costs that they're losing. They're actually getting about 40 cents on a dollar now. And I'd also like to add my name to House Bill 776.
Mr. Pete. Mr. Green.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to support Chairwoman Penny Houston's bills, House Bill 825, which affects one of my wineries down there for the distillery, and House Bill 887.
Mrs.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lindsay.
I'd like to ask for, on the first page, halfway down, modified open, House Bill 804, already previously discussed. Basically what it'll do is help children who are having to testify in court to be able to do so remotely.
Is that the only thing you've got?
That's all I have today.
Ms. Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the first page, there are two propositions. House Bill 833, Ms. Jones has been here several times asking for that bill to change.
Yeah, I talked to her and told her to come back tomorrow.
Okay. Also, on HB 828, Mr. Mabry has discussed with us his ambulance chasing proposition as well. First page.
828? Okay.
828.
All right.
For Mr. Mabry.
Okay. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to request favorable consideration of Mr. Mayo's bill HB 405 on the first page, which would bring public charter schools into conformance with traditional public schools. HB 750 by Mr. Fry, which would allow nonprofit corporations to be exempt from mortgage loan origination licensing requirements, as has been discussed with banking and finance. And lastly, Mr. Glanton's HB 1009 on page 2, which would simply extend an existing opportunity for Clayton County to join MARTA at their discretion.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name with
HB 869, Chairman Yates's bill, and HB 1009, Mr. Gladden's bill.
What was that last one, Mr. Williams?
HB 1009.
Okay, back to Ms. Cooper.
Yes, sir. This is House Bill 965. Would ask that it be moved to modified structure. And there is an amendment.
Have a motion and a second to put it modified structure. I've done it, so don't worry about it.
Pardon?
I've already moved it.
Oh, thank you. Then I have an amendment. It was just an amendment with a disagreement between the people who drew the bill up, the one that drew it up for me, and the judiciary legal person. They got into a discrepancy over the wording, and they changed it in committee, and then decided afterwards as they talked that they needed to put it back to what it was, and that's all this does.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any disagreement? All right.
Thank you.
Everybody done? Well, this is for tomorrow. And let's just go ahead under modified structure. HB 965. Any opposition? So, under modified open, HB 947. Anybody want a second? Any opposition? It's on. Under modified open, HB 939. Any opposition? Under modified open, HB 938. Any opposition? Under modified open, HB 804. Any opposition? Modified open, HB 803. Any opposition? Modified open, HB 776. Any opposition? Modified open, HB 761. Any opposition? Modified open, HB 643. Any opposition? Modified open, HB 566. Any opposition? Modified open, HB 449. Any opposition? Modified structure, HB 826. Any opposition? So, modified structure, HB 828. Any opposition? I lied to you. Thank you, Mr. Leader. Otherwise,
I just didn't hear you good.
Otherwise, I don't know what would have put on there. How about 825? Let's get them winemakers ready. It's on modified structure. He couldn't be here, but I told him I'd put it on HB 731, Andy Welch's bill. Any opposition? It's on modified structure HB 504. Any opposition? It's on modified structure HB 872. Any opposition? It's on under structured HB 755. Any opposition? Under modified, under structured HB 412. Any opposition? Under structured HB 782. Any opposition? If y'all all talk real quick tomorrow, we might get out. That's 19. That's it.
Hold on just a second.
You want me to tell them to hold on? Hold on, hold on.
This is Rich's. It's on the floor today.
Yep.
Is he supposed
Yeah,
to?
I made the motion. He made the motion. Got out. and I told
Okay,
him.
it was when I was at it.
Yeah. We're done. I'm more efficient than my lawyer thinks I am. I said